For question number 28, we have the situation again where we have two different trig words. So I need this sine squared one to go away. And again, I'm going to use the Pythagorean identity, which is sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. And to replace the word sine squared, I need to keep the sine squared and move the cosine squared over to the other side. So this is going to go over to this side as a minus cosine squared. So 1 minus cosine squared is going to replace sine squared x. So I'm going to have 2, and then parenthesis 1 minus cosine squared x equals 2 plus cosine x. Next, I'm going to distribute. So I'm going to end up with 2 minus 2 cosine squared x equals 2 plus cosine x. We need to get the word cosine all on the same side, and I want my highest power to be positive. So I'm going to bring this over to the right side. So moving this one over to the right side will be 2 cosine squared x, followed by cosine x. Now this 2, I'm going to bring over and put it with the other 2, and when I do that, subtracting this 2, that actually adds up to 0, so that will be out of the mix. And now my equation equals 0 on the left side. From here, I have to take out a greatest common factor, and the greatest common factor is going to be cosine x. So if I take out a cosine x, I'll be left with 2 cosine x plus 1. Doing my zero products, cosine x is going to equal 0. And then remember to solve this parenthesis. We're going to have cosine x equals negative 1 and then divide by 2. So that one will be cosine x equals negative 1 divided by 2. So these are the values I now have to look up on the unit circle. I'll slide up here and look at them. So cosine being 0 will happen at pi over 2 and also let 3 pi over 2. Cosine equaling negative 1/2, so cosine equaling negative 1/2 will be at 2 pi over 3 and then also at 4 pi over 3. So let's go down and write those values. So for the cosine one, cosine of x equaling 0, our answers were pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. And our cosine x equaling negative 1/2 occurred at 2 pi over 3 and 4 pi over 3. For question number 29, when we start solving this one, you're going to see that we're going to end up with a trinomial. I need to bring this 2 over to the left side. So I will have secant squared x minus secant x minus 2 equals 0. So now with my trinomial, it's going to be parenthesis, parenthesis. I'm going to have secant x times secant x. Remember, you have to multiply to get the first, and that'll be in the first blanks. And now I have to multiply to get a negative 2, so to get a negative 2, I'm going to have a positive and a negative. And to multiply to get 2, I want the bigger one to be negative, so that would be a 2 and a 1. And now I'm going to use my zero products. So for the first one, it's going to be the secant of x equals negative 1. And the second one, the secant of x equals 2. Now I can't look up secant on the unit circle, so I want to know the reciprocal of secant. And the reciprocal of secant is the word cosine. So the cosine of x is going to equal, now I have to have the reciprocal of negative 1, and that would be 1 over negative 1, which would still be cosine of x equals negative 1. And over on this other side here, I'm going to have cosine of x equals, the reciprocal of 2 is going to be 1/2. So these are the values I need to look up on the unit circle. So we're going to be looking up the cosine being -1 and the cosine being 1/2. So the cosine is -1 over here at pi, that's the only one. And the cosine is 1/2 at pi over 3. And then also at 5 pi over 3. So slide back down and write those values in. So for the cosine of x equaling -1, our only answer for that one is pi. And the cosine of x equals 1/2 at pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3.